The girl's footsteps echoed among the gravestones. Every instinct told her to turn back. She hated being here late at night, but her boyfriend was always there working the midnight shift, alone amongst the dead. She looked down at the basket of food she had brought along. A homemade meal always raised his spirits on the long, dark nights. As she got deeper into the cemetery, her unease grew. She scanned the tombs, looking for him. Then a chill ran down her spine. Something was behind her. She slowly turned around, her eyes wide with shock. Cemeteries are places of rest, and during the day they can be beautiful and peaceful. But when darkness falls, the people who keep cemeteries and funeral homes running experience a different, eerier reality. On today's bone-chilling episode of the Infographics Show, we'll reveal some of the most spine-tingling things they've ever experienced. Number 15. The Dark Angel. One cemetery worker had grown to like his job. After all, it was quiet and he was in charge of his own work schedule. But there was one thing about the cemetery that always made him uneasy: an eerie statue of a weeping angel. This creepy statue had become a major fixture in the area, with reputations of being haunted. And that brought the scariest thing of all: ghost hunters. The cemetery had become a hub for out-of-state visitors, all wanting to experience strange phenomena near the statue. Most didn't, but the worker heard cries, saw an odd fog, and other supernatural energy near it. It even seemed like the statue was moving sometimes. Whatever it was, he and the other employees tended to give it a wide berth. Let's take this inside then. Number 14. Grip from Beyond. Cemetery workers might have to be the ones to walk the grave, but there are those who have to work even closer to the deceased. One funeral home worker was prepping a body that was very recently deceased. He was in the process of working on the body, including shaving the arms and legs, and as he got to the arms, he felt something unexplainable. The deceased's fingers were moving and curling around his hand. A case of someone prematurely pronounced dead? The rise of the walking dead? Not quite. It was the natural process of rigor mortis, as the tendons tighten. That happened at the most terrifying possible time. Cemeteries always have guests, but not all of them are welcome. Number 13. The Children on the Edge. One cemetery worker never reported seeing anything unusual in the cemetery, but the outside of it was a different story. Periodically, he and his fellow workers would see several small children lurking in the tree line near the fringes of the cemetery grounds, and there was always something unusual about them. They would be wearing the same white outfits every time, and they were always just out of view. Nicknamed the Tree Children by the workers, they were speculated to be the restless ghosts of children laid to rest there. They also could be local children or maybe pranksters who wanted to unnerve the workers, but no one was ever able to get close enough to talk to any of them, and it kept on happening, always lurking by the outskirts, just too far to be seen. And sometimes the job wears on people's sanity. Number 12. Dream of the Living Dead. For one cemetery worker, it was a long but quiet day. He worked at a plot next to an old chapel, which was surrounded by massive 12-foot hedges. This looked like the perfect place to take a nap for an hour. So he got into his car and drove into a shady spot. He shut his eyes and drifted off, and woke up to a nightmare. His car was surrounded by the dead. They had crawled out of their graves, still dressed in their funeral best, and were pressed up against his windshield, staring at him like he was the curiosity, not them. He was surrounded. There was no escape. And then he woke up with a start. It was a nightmare, but one vivid enough for him to quit on the spot. This was just a dream, but one mortuary worker had a close call with death itself. Number 11. Heating up. Working in a crematorium is one of the most intense jobs at a funeral home. It's hot, dangerous, and there is a stench that is hard to get out. But at least it's predictable, or at least it should be. One funeral home worker was sleeping one night when he was shaken awake by his wife, only to see a plume of thick smoke coming from the crematorium furnace. But there was no one being cremated and no one manning the furnace. He raced over to the superheated room and found a massive fire inside the furnace, inside a darkened room that he had to unlock. He turned off the furnace and there was nothing inside. But the thick black smoke that was coming out would only be produced by something burning. He and his wife both swore that neither had left the furnace on before leaving for the night, leaving this fiery mystery unresolved forever. And it wouldn't be the only mystery that would be totally unexplainable. Number 10. The Void. Cemeteries are big, and they sit on valuable land. When one man inherited his family's old cemetery, the city wanted to buy it. The plan would be to sell the valuable land and exchange it for another parcel of land where the caskets would be reburied. It would be a delicate operation to get permission from the families, exhume the light wooden caskets, and rebury them in a new final resting place. But as they got to the northernmost plot of land, the excavators saw something was wrong. Some of the caskets seemed to have barely anything in them, and some had nothing at all. No sounds of movement inside. After getting permission from the families, they opened the caskets and found them empty and pristine, as if there had never been anything in there at all. Why was the cemetery burying empty caskets? And where did the actual bodies all go? And there's sometimes nothing scarier than the fear of your own mortality. Number 9. There but for the grace of God. One young man was working at a mortuary when a body came in from the medical examiner's office. Before prepping the body, they had to sort out all the personal belongings that came in the body bag. All the belongings are listed on a receipt, and removing them is the first step of the mortuary process. He opened the bag and nearly fell over in terror because the man in the body bag looked exactly like him. He didn't have a twin, he wasn't part of a cloning experiment, and he was pretty sure he wasn't dead. But the dead man was around his age, had similar tattoos and hairstyle, and had even been wearing similar jewelry when he died. He was in the middle of questioning reality when his coworker came in and yelled, "That guy looks like you!" It was just likely a surreal coincidence, but one that no doubt kept him up at night for a long time. Legends say not all ghosts are malevolent, if you let them help you. Number 8. Lights, please. Funeral homes are places often run by the elderly, so it is no surprise that some people literally die on the job. One man worked at a funeral home where an old director's assistant, John, supposedly had a heart attack and died in the building. The building was rather spooky, with old chapel lights that tended to flicker on and off, a problem when you're trying to concentrate on delicate work. Fortunately, there was a trick to it. The lights would start to flicker, and the new apprentice was told by his bosses to simply ask John to lay off the lights when the family of the deceased was coming. And while no one could prove what made the lights start flickering, they always seemed to calm down after a polite request. Maybe old John just wanted to feel useful at his old workplace. But few people got up close and personal with a ghost like this next woman. Number 7. Love without limits. Working as a cemetery worker, you get to know people at their most vulnerable. One woman who worked there developed a friendship with an old man who would come every Monday to put flowers on his wife's grave. One day he came as usual, and he seemed unusually chatty. They talked all about his wife and his memories of her. Then he had to go, and the next day she was called in to work on a new body that had just arrived. It was the old man. He was old, so this wasn't a big surprise. She started preparing his plot and arranged the service, but was surprised by just how quickly he was being buried. She asked what the rush was, and was told the old man had died almost a week ago. What's scarier than a dead person in your funeral home? A living one. Number 6. Not quite dead. It was every parent's worst nightmare. A terrible car crash with 3 teens being pronounced dead at the scene. One male fatality was identified by his mother, who asked that her son be sent to a specific funeral home. The worker examined him, prepared to begin embalming him, when the young man with a severe head injury suddenly jerked and uttered sounds that sounded a lot like, "Where the hell am I?" How does someone drop a living person off at a funeral home? Well, according to a person who claims to be the cousin of the not deceased, this happened in the 1970s, and on-site medicine might have missed faint signs of life. The injured boy was taken to the hospital where he eventually recovered from a coma and lived a normal life with some lingering symptoms of head trauma. As for the funeral home worker, he reportedly went home for a change of clothes. And there is nothing scarier than someone where they shouldn't be. Number 5. The unknown resident. One of the responsibilities of a cemetery worker is security, to make sure everyone gets out of the grounds before closing time. One man working the night shift locked the gate, then drove around to check for any latecomers so he could let them out. On his final drive-through late at night, he saw an old woman walking along a massive mausoleum. He pulled up to her and told her they're closing. She ignored him, so he got out of his car, and there was no old woman to be seen. The mausoleum was hundreds of feet long with no break in it, and the woman was not moving fast, so it was impossible for her to have left the graveyard. The worker spent the rest of his shift combing the cemetery before parking in a wide open space to look for any sign of the woman, but he never saw her again. Cemetery workers are used to the strange, but visitors definitely are not. Number 4. The girlfriend. Working at a cemetery can be a lonely job, so it helps to have someone close to you. One worker was grateful for his girlfriend, who would visit him at his night shift to bring him dinner. He had experienced some strange things at the cemetery, but never told her about them. That is, until she experienced them for herself. As he was walking her to her car, her ponytail suddenly felt like it was caught on something, like a tree branch, except that there were no trees around, and she admitted that it felt like someone had run their fingers through her hair and then grabbed her ponytail. And that was the end of our man's nightly dinner visits. And that's not the most terrifying prank a ghost supposedly pulled. Number 3. Stacks of death. One young man who grew up in the funeral business reported a terrifying event that happened when his grandfather and uncle ran the place. One night, they saw someone walk behind one of the trees. It was probably someone taking a shortcut, so they decided not to investigate and went to sleep. And the next morning, the police were there. When they came outside, 7 of the plots had been dug up. The heavy headstones had been assembled like a house of cards, and even more shockingly, the caskets had all been stacked on top of one another, towering close to 30 feet tall, something that would be near impossible to do without a machine. An elaborate prank and vandalism, or something much more supernatural. But nothing compares to the horror that one mortuary worker saw in the crematorium. Number 2. Into the fire. A funeral home worker took a cremation job for a very large man who had recently died. After the service, he loaded the man, who weighed around 375 pounds, into the cremation chamber and sat down to watch a movie with his wife. And then came a thud, and then another. He raced down to the cremator, and he could see inside the man's large body was twitching and his mouth was opening and closing, as if he was screaming. Now the man was long dead, and there was no chance of a mistaken diagnosis. His organs had already been removed. Bodies can move and contract in disturbing ways in the early stages of cremation, but the mortuary worker swears he has never seen anything this disturbing. These are all stories shared, but this close call was so terrifying, it made the news. Number 1. Early admission. It was 2018 when a 59-year-old cemetery worker was digging a grave in East Hanover, New Jersey. This would be a fancy final resting place, complete with an 800-pound concrete vault cover. The cover was placed in position, and Peter Ferencz descended into the grave to finish preparing it. And that's when the vault cover caved in, and Mr. Ferencz got an up-close look at what he was preparing. The worker was pinned by his chest to the ground, barely able to breathe. He was trapped in his own early grave. It took a whole team of police, firefighters, and EMTs to excavate the grave and rescue Ferencz before transporting him to the hospital. And if you think this is a rare event, it happened again in 2023, also in New Jersey. Want to know more terrifying tales from beyond? Watch morgue employees reveal things that would scare everyone, or check out this video instead.